Welcome back to Upper Bowl Perspective, a Utah Jazz-based podcast showing that the fans sitting in the nosebleeds know just as much as those sitting courtside. I'm back with co-hosts Kyler Sparrow and Caleb Walker as we continue to talk about possible picks for the Jazz at number 23. Using the information from 6 different mock drafts, we excluded players who were selected in the lottery in at least 2 of the mock drafts, or didn't make it to the Jazz in at least 4 of the mock drafts, meaning that in addition to the obvious lottery picks, we excluded players like Rui Hachimura, Bol, Romeo Langford, and Goga Bitadze. We took turns draft style to discuss our favorite players. In our last episode, we talked about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Matisse Thybulle, Dylan Windler, Chuma Okeke, Ty Jerome, and Keldon Johnson. We're going to pick up right where we left off, and we will be discussing 9 more guys we would like to see in a Jazz uniform next season.
All right, I'm back up on the clock. And a guy that I know maybe isn't liked by all of us here in the room. Once again, I'm going to take Kevin Porter Jr., the freshman out of USC. He's 6'6", 213. He's got a 6'9" wingspan. He, quite honestly, in my opinion, and I know in the opinion of a lot of other people, he is a guy that might be the best shot creator in this entire draft class. He has so much ability off the dribble to shake and bake a little bit, to make windows to get an open jumper. And though he may not be perfect inside, ball movement system, the blender, he didn't really do that in college. He didn't show great ability of scoring within an offense. He is a guy that I think, if you watch the Jazz in the playoffs last season, they need somebody that can create a shot, and I think this guy's the best potential to do that. He's a little bit of a hit and miss because, he came off the bench due to some immaturity issues and maybe some coach stubbornness. He liked to play the older guys when he was coming in as a freshman. But if you can get this guy motivated, I really think he's a spark plug kind of guy. I compare him a little bit to maybe a J.R. Smith, just somebody that had so much scoring ability, but you just need to put him in a good system, get him coached up well, and I think the Jazz system, the Jazz coaches are somebody that can probably bring out the best in this guy, and I think the best in that guy is going to be really good.
Yeah, he's someone I like his game a lot. He's someone that I didn't look too much into just because in a lot of mock drafts I think I saw him in the late lottery, and just someone I have little hope that will fall to the Jazz, even less than, let's say, a Nickeil Alexander-Walker figure. But if he does fall, which I don't think will happen, he would be great for our offense. Like everything that you said, he's just ability to create, ability to score. But I didn't love his defensive ability in a lot of things I've seen. He's just kind of his guy, and he does his thing. Doesn't work so well in part of the system, and kind of, especially in a defensive system, he gets lost a little bit in the system and lacks awareness and gets caught looking at the ball, loses his guy, and is subject to some of, let's say, if there's a lot of back cuts, then he'll leave his guy open. And just his maturity issues. He was suspended indefinitely midseason at USC, which was an undisclosed reason. And it was an off-court reason, but just something like that tends to make you worry a little bit. But I think he would be great in the Jazz system, just the camaraderie that is there, and I think that would help him a lot with just his focus and work ethic, like you were talking, and getting him committed.
I wish I had more to add on this. Basically what Kyler and Caleb said is exactly what I had to say. I think he's a great shot creator. I think he'd work great in the Jazz system, but I am worried about his defense, and I'm definitely worried about some of those off-court issues in his maturity. I wonder if he's going to be a guy who might be maybe a little toxic in the locker room, but I think he's definitely a skilled player who's going to find himself playing a solid role in the NBA.
Yeah, I think he's one of the more polarizing players because even though, there are teams in some mock drafts that are taking him late lottery, mid-teens, all those polarizing things that we've talked about are why the reason that he didn't end up on the excluded list. And he's a guy that I'm not quite as concerned about on the defense. He has mental lapses, but when he he tries on defense. I think he shows great defensive potential, and I think the Jazz are going to bring that out of him. But we'll see with him. All right, coming up next, we got JR with his next pick.
All right. First off, let me just say that I absolutely love this guy. With my third pick, I'm going to go with Admiral Schofield. 6'5", shooting guard, small forward out of Tennessee. He's a little bit older at 22 years old. But, man, this guy is thick. He is 240 pounds. Last year with the Volunteers, he scored 16.5 points per game, had 6.1 rebounds, 2.1 assists, and shot 47% from the field on a very, very good Tennessee team. NBA.com actually compares him as kind of a Jay Crowder type of player, and as a guy who absolutely loves Jay Crowder, I love that comparison. He's kind of one of those guys that you look at him and you're like, you are this just absolutely brick of a guy who played extremely well in college. And while he's definitely a little bit different than what we usually see coming into the NBA, physically, I think he has the potential to be a really, really solid player for the Jazz. And on top of that, he shot 42% from three last year on almost 5 attempts a game, so he can definitely shoot the ball from the outside, which is something that the Jazz could absolutely use coming off the bench.
Mm-hmm. I really like Admiral Schofield as well. Probably not quite as high as you on him, but I love his shooting. He was a little low on his free throw percentage, which I look at more for the projection to the NBA on shooting. Than I would have liked. Is under 70%. That he didn't take a lot of free throws during the season, so that might be part of the reason. But he is a man, that is for sure. Just a thick, deep defensive end type of guy who I think the Jay Crowder comparison is a really good comparison. Just gets in there, gets rebounds, gets boards, good finisher, and good defender. I think, though, the thing that worries me with him is just he's so big, and playing on the wing with his size at just 6'5", those quicker wing players, and if he gets in a switching defense where he's put on like a Kyrie Irving, or well, obviously anyone would have trouble with Kyrie Irving, but like with those quicker wing and guard players, I think it'll just be hard for him to keep up with them just because he's so thick, his lateral quickness isn't there. Also, something that worries me a little bit is he's 22 years old, which I'm fine with older prospects, but especially with how he plays, he just uses his size and his physicality so much. This is something that David Locke talks a little bit about, but I agree with a lot, is that when you're a 22-year-old, 6'5", 240 guy coming in and beating up on these 18-year-old kids coming out of high school, then your game tends to look a little better than it might be. So that's the only thing really that's what worries me the most, is that just his experience and his size might have contributed to make his game look a little more inflated than it really is. But I do like him.
Yeah, this is a guy that was also one of my early man crushes, but he ended up coming in at 9th out of the 10. Overall, he's 30th on my big board. And while I do believe that free throw percentage is a pretty good indicator, this guy had 4 years and he shot 5 attempts a game, so I do think we can trust a little bit his three-point percentage. It increased every year, and for three years in a row, he shot 39% or higher. So I think that is something that's going to translate. So I just want you to imagine Jay Crowder that can shoot semi-efficiently from outside. And that's the guy that I see. I think he's very limited and he's not going to be able to really create for his own offense at all. I think he can finish in transition. He had some really nice, flashy dunks. He's going to be a highlight player. You guys mentioned him as a wing 2 to 3. I don't think he's going to play a single minute out there. I don't think he has the wiggle, the quickness. But we're talking about like a Jay Crowder, PJ Tucker type 4, where a guy who's undersized, but his grit, his size, and his passion is going to make it so you can't bully him around at the 4. And if he plays the 4, I like him, and maybe sparingly at the 3, but he's not a guy that I'm putting out there on the wing and trying to guard any kind of guard or even a remotely quick small forward, because he just doesn't have that ability. But I really do like him as a small ball 4.
And a lot of the mock drafts that you look at, they have him going in the second round, which I don't think is a bad place for him to go. But kind of as my last little bit on why I love him so much, he was an absolute beast against ranked teams last year. In just the games he played last year against ranked teams, he averaged 18 points and over 6 rebounds per game. And I just love the fact that some of his best games, some of his most consistent games were against ranked competition. And that just gets me really excited as a guy who I think has the grit and the tenacity, even if he may not have the perfect body, that I think it'll take to really find his role in the NBA.
Awesome. I like the pick. And, just one last thing on him. He was very consistent. He didn't have a lot of bad games, which is something that I like because, like I said, if we're comparing him to Jay Crowder, he's a little bit more consistent in his ability to shoot from outside. And I think that if the Jazz do end up taking him, he's a seamless Jay Crowder replacement for when that contract expires. All right, Caleb, who are you taking with your next pick?
Okay, with my next pick, I'm going to take Grant Williams. The 4, he's comes in. He's a little undersized, so he's played the 4 in Tennessee. And he's just someone I really like with the ability to play make. He's a good passing big. He came in with, only 2.3 assists. Oh, wait.
3.2 assists.
Anyway, getting lost in my
You got 3.2
document.
assists.
3.2 assists, 7.5 rebounds. He's a bully ball big. He can get down in the post and fight with the best of them, even though he's only 6'7". He's got a big frame. He didn't shoot very well from the 3 this past year, only at 32%, but 82% free throw shooter, projects to a better 3-point percentage. And I think that's just part of the system that he played in. They asked him to go be in the post and facilitate down there and just score from there. So I think with some practice and some training that he could get a little higher up and be probably an average to above average, slightly above average 3-point shooter. But I think one of my comparisons, just someone I think of him as, is similar to a Jay Crowder type player, just more athletic and a better ability to finish. But same thing where he's just a little bit undersized, but he has the quickness a little bit to go play on the wing, be a switchable defender, and kind of facilitate down low, which Jay Crowder doesn't have much of that either. But I think just a high IQ guy who can defend, score, all-around player that I really like.
Yeah, with him, I mean, in my scouting for these players, Tennessee was the team I got to watch the most. I don't know if I'd count that as a blessing or a curse just because their system was so bad. It was just basically throw it to Grant Williams in the post and let him do his thing. So that's not going to work. He's not in that way in the NBA. But I do think he translates well. I think that he has a great frame, but at the same time he can go out and defend on the perimeter on switches, like you said. I'm really big into switchable 4s. Somebody that's going to be able to, we hope, I think he's going to be maybe an average shooter from outside eventually. He's a guy, I compared a little bit to like a Draymond Green light, as a guy who's just very vocal leader, as a guy who's not great from outside, but very versatile on both ends of the floor. And he was the leader for a very high-level program. You know, Tennessee was number 1 for a bit there this season. So he's a guy he came and worked out for the Jazz as well. And so I can see it happening with the Jazz selecting at 23.
Yeah. I mean, I think with him, you see that he's a very, very high-caliber player. He was a back-to-back SEC Player of the Year and a first-team All-American. So, I mean, when you just look at that, you kind of think, man, here's a guy who's just the complete star of his team and doesn't know how to share the ball. But then at the same time, he shared the court the entire season with Admiral Schofield, who we just talked about, and Jordan Bone, who's expected to go in the second round. So there you got 3 guys all sharing the court, who are all probably going to be drafted here next week. And I think that because of that kind of attitude that he showed, that he can play with other high-level players and really be a leader in a very strong organization, I think he's going to fit well if he does get drafted by the Jazz. like kind of having the best part of our team as our team mentality. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be able to really adjust super well to the kind of culture of the Utah Jazz. I do think he's a little undersized. I don't know if his dominant post game is going to translate super well to the NBA, but kind of where he went in our draft at the end of the third round, I think it's a very appropriate place for him to go.
Awesome. I do agree he's not going to be able to win in the same way in the NBA that he did in college. All right, my fourth pick. I'm super excited, guys. I've got all 4 of my top 4 on my big board. You want a moldable piece of clay that you could just do whatever you want with? Give me Nicholas Claxton, the big man out of Georgia. I love this player as a developmental piece for the Jazz. 6'11", 7'3" wingspan, 220 pounds. Stats aren't great, I'm not going to lie. He had 2.5 blocks a game. That was really good. 13 points a game, 8.6 rebounds. Georgia was playing against superior competition for the majority of the season. What I like about this guy is for such length, he's also so versatile. They talked about it in the ringer a little bit. I didn't get to scout too much of the draft combine, but they force you to switch picks at the combine, and this guy did a really good job going out and defending guards at a good level for a guy that's viewed as a 4/5. He's the guy at Georgia. He was asked to handle the ball and initiate plays a lot of the time. He's a guy that didn't have great numbers, 28% from 3, 64% from the free throw line. Having him so high, having him number 4 global prospect, does hinge a little bit on his ability to at least become like a Jay Crowder level 3-pointer shooter where the defense has to respect him a little bit so he can attack closeouts, but not so much. I'm not banking on him becoming a high-level shooter, but just a respectable shooter that has just length and potential up the wazoo. This is the guy that if you want a moldable piece of clay that's all on the Jazz trainers to get the most out of this guy, this is your man.
Yeah, I didn't love him as much as you, obviously. I think he projects to be able to be a very switchable defender. And if he can work on his jumper a little bit, actually maybe a lot of it, then he'd be able to be a versatile offensive weapon as well. He's someone to me that definitely is a developmental piece, someone I don't really think that should be taken in the first round, probably. So I don't love the pick quite as much as you do right at 23. But, yeah, he very versatile, good defender, switchable, and on offense and defense, just able to be used wherever you need him, kind of. But he's really skinny.
He's really skinny.
His 6 is almost 7 foot, only weighing 217. That might be part due to a late growth spurt that he had in college, and just needs some time to beef up a little bit. But I think that
imagine if Derek Favors just comes in one off-season jacked. That's the guy right there. Best player in the NBA.
But
well, I mean, Derek Favors is from Georgia, so
hey,
it's not a terrible comparison.
So,
yeah. I mean, I can't really disagree a whole lot with what you said, Kyler, because I think what you said was valid. But I think the main reason why I'm not a huge fan of that pick is because I think there's a guy at center that I like quite a bit better than Nick Claxton, which I'll probably be talking about in just a second because he's the next guy that I'm going to draft. I think that he does have the potential to become a good NBA player in time. I do think he's a huge project, especially today. There was that article done by Bleacher Report that talked about how Epe, there's almost a 0% chance he's going to be with the Jazz next season. And there's also a decent chance that we don't have Derek Favors coming back next season. So I think being able to have a guy who can be our third option as a center a little bit more immediately than Nick Claxton is something that is going to be very valuable for the Jazz.
Give me that guy in free agency.
Huh?
Give me that guy in free agency.
Well, I mean, we'll probably get one in free agency, but if Epe doesn't come back and if we don't have Derek Favors come back, then we're going to need 2 more guys who can play the 5, and I'd love to see us get one in free agency and then have one that we can draft and see if he can, kind of learn from Rudy Gobert and become more developmental, and I don't know if Nick Claxton's that guy.
Yeah, see, for me, Nick Claxton's versatile enough that he can play the 4 next to Rudy. Whereas, if I am correct in who I think your center is, just purely a center. David Locke talked about it a little bit in his podcast today, that being only able to play one position limits you a lot, where I think Nick Claxton has the speed and the quickness and just the length and the strides. He's going to be able to match up with a lot of 4s. While I do think his primary position is the 5, I can see him as the first big man off the bench for the Jazz. And as far as the third center goes, dude, you got to be a Tony Bradley believer. Come on.
Oh, my goodness. I will go on record saying that I am not a Tony Bradley believer, unfortunately.
All right, but you are a believer in your next center, apparently. So who you got coming up next?
I am. I don't love this guy either, but I think if he's still available at 23 and everybody else we've talked about, with the exception of Nick Claxton's not there, he's a good option. It's a guy that the Jazz have already shown interest in, and that guy is Naz Reid, the center out of LSU. He is only 19 years old, 6'10", 255, so I think he's got a solid build for a center. And he's young enough that I think he's going to keep getting better. Last year, he averaged 13.6 points a game and a little over 7 rebounds, and he shot 47% from the field, which are some pretty solid numbers. And what I really, really like about him is that he's pretty mobile for his size, he's a great ball handler for his size, and he shot 33% from 3 last season. I think as a guy who can be more of a mobile 5, which as much as I love Rudy Gobert, he's not. I think being able to have a 5 who can come in, has the size to, I think, start making a decent impact as our third option center for the Jazz, and also a guy who can shoot the ball relatively consistently from the 3-point line, I think is a guy that is just a really good option.
I don't know if I'd put him over Nick Claxton, so I might be on the side of Tyler here.
Yeah, let's go, baby!
Naz Reid, I think if you're talking about him as a center, like you were saying, instead of Nick Claxton, he's a more versatile guy. I think could play the 4 as well, especially with his size. He's only 6'9". Might be it is pretty small for a center if you're going center as the reason you're drafting him. He has a touch to be a good shooter, but he's just not very quick. Defensively, that could be a big problem. In shot blocking, switches, in the modern NBA right now, that projects to be problematic when you get into any of those situations on defense. So developmental piece maybe. Think I like Nick Claxton a little better.
There you go. I like him a lot of it better. Naz Reid, he didn't even make my big board. I did a big board of 40. He's not on there. He's a guy that, if you're looking for a guy that's a change of pace from Rudy, I'd much rather go for a guy like Nick Claxton, just because Naz Reid, he has a better low post game, but I think that's the only thing that he that I would rather take him over Nick Claxton. He's just a guy. He can shoot. His percentages were good, but if you look at his shot, it's only wide open. It's almost like a set shot kind of shot. So he's not gonna be a guy that's gonna get a lot of looks to shoot. I mean, maybe the Jazz could train that shot a little bit to get some lift on it, so he doesn't have to be wide open when he shoots it. I thought his shot selection was poor oftentimes in the post, just because he would try to bully people. And in college, you do that when you're the superior player, but he's not going to be the superior player very much. In the NBA, I don't see him as an athlete. He's just a guy that I probably wouldn't take at 53. So,
wow, that hurts.
23?
No, 53.
Oh,
I don't think I'd take him in the second round either, unless all of my top 40 are gone, which I don't think they will be. All right, Caleb.
okay. I'm going with Cameron Johnson.
There you go. I like that.
Sweet shooter.
Love that pick.
Best shooter in the draft, I think. Coming in, I think he shot 45.7%. 45.7%. That is amazing to me.
It's really good.
And basically, that's all he can do. Good spot-up shooter, can kill from 3. And I think he can pass pretty well, and he's selfless. He knows his role, probably because he's so good at what he does. Little bit of he can't create really off the dribble. He doesn't have that wiggle and that can't finish very well. But I don't think that's what we're going to ask him to do. I think he's going to be a Kyle Korver, a Klay Thompson, where your Klay's probably a little less, because he can go in and finish and score. But he's, in my mind, the replacement for Kyle Korver, especially if Kyle retires this season, which he's thinking about doing. He's just the guy that will give us so much more three-point shooting from out far. And he's had a hip surgery, and he actually got better on perimeter defense, which doesn't really make sense to me, but that's what happened. But he's still he's a liability on defense, especially on the wing. He doesn't have that lateral movement that you need. But especially in the Jazz system, I think you can hide him a little bit and just rely on his shooting to space the floor, which is needed. So
yeah, he's a guy where I put him also as the best shooter available in the Jazz range over guys that we've talked about before, like Ty Jerome and Dylan Windler, just because of the size. And he did it at a high-level program at North Carolina. 6'9", like we said, 6'10" wingspan, so doesn't have great length compared to his height. Also only under 205 pounds. I like him best. You bring him in, you ask him to get a few pounds and have him be a stretch four. I kind of like him as a Danilo Gallinari guy who shoots well from outside, not very quick, but can just get a shot over people if they're smaller than him. So if you try to play somebody smaller than Cameron Johnson, I think he's going to be able to get off clean shots. I think he's going to hit him at a high percentage. He was my best player available over on the board, so I like the pick.
What I absolutely love about this guy is that I think he's mature. He's 23 years old, so he is a little bit older. I think he has some experience that'll help him get ready for the NBA. But what I absolutely love is that he played some of his best games of his career this past season against Gonzaga and Duke. He scored 24 points against Gonzaga and 25 points against Duke. And there are a lot of future NBA players and a lot of future NBA starters who are playing those games. He is skinny. He is a liability on defense right now. But I think if you give him to Quinn Snyder and the rest of the Jazz staff, and I don't think there's a chance that he's not going to become a better defender. I don't know if he's ever going to be great, but he's definitely going to become better. And having that ability to shoot so well from three is something that I think the Jazz are going to need, especially if Kyle Korver does end up retiring.
And he's someone I love if Kyle stays for a year. Oh my goodness. If he can train Cameron Johnson, that would be the best.
That would be
perfect mentor.
That would be beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
So,
all right, coming up on our last round, each of us is going to give our fifth pick. We're running a little bit long, so let's make this last round a little quick here. I'm up on the board, and this guy, he may not be the best player available, but I got to talk about him because he's probably the most fun. Carson Edwards, point guard from Purdue.
My pick.
He's a little 6-foot guy, in shoes, so under 6 foot, but he has solid wingspan. He's a 6'6" wingspan, and from the games I watched him especially versus Virginia Tech, a high-level program, and he just has the ability to put the ball in the basket. His percentages don't necessarily say that. He only shot 39% from the field, 35% from three, but this guy was completely covered this entire time. So once he was able to expand his range a little bit in the tournament, and his coach let him shoot those deep threes that wowed everybody in the tournament. That's when he really was able to score at a higher efficiency level. He's got a really solid frame too. He's 200 pounds, so he's a foot shorter and only 20 pounds lighter than Nick Claxton, my guy. So he's a guy, he tries hard on defense, and I think, playing a team that just has one of those perimeter catch and shoot players, you can hide him on people like that on defense. I'm a little bit higher than most people. He's shot 84% from the free throw line. Give me a guy with my last pick that's just going to be able to come in and fill it up. He's number 32 on the big board, and my comparison is an athletic Jimmer Fredette.
I actually really like that comparison of Jimmer Fredette. It's a fun comparison. All right, so for my last pick, I'm going to go with the guy that I think has a super, super high ceiling, but a pretty low potential floor, and that's KZ Okpala out of Stanford. 20-year-old, 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, averaged almost 17 points and 6 rebounds per game last year. and shot about 37% from three. I think he's definitely a more offensive-minded player. I don't think he's a great defender, but I do think he's a great athlete. I think because of his huge wingspan, I think he has the potential to be able to guard anything from the 2 to the 4. And I think he could really be a guy that we could see develop. I don't think he's going to make an immediate impact for the Jazz. I don't see him as a guy who's going to do anything really special this season. I don't think he's that kind of a guy. But I think if you give him a few years and give him some minutes to be able to develop and to continue to improve his game, I think he's a guy who can be a really, really good maybe small ball stretch for in the future.
I like the pick. With my last pick, I'm going to go for upside as well with Talen Horton-Tucker out of Iowa State.
I like the pick.
There's a reason he's my last pick. I don't love his shooting ability, but coming in at 6'4", 235, he's a big guy. And with a 7'1" wingspan, that guy can guard wherever you need him to. He can play against the guards. He can just like swallow them with his huge wingspan that's like 7 inches longer than theirs. And if he needs to, he can go and use his size to play with the bigs. Bigger than 2 of the bigs that we've talked about recently, so, well, heavier at least. And probably with similar wingspans. So, I just think he's only 18 and a half right now. And can't shoot really, doesn't have much touch, not a good free throw shooter, only shot 30% from 3. Took some bad shots, but I think in a system with Quinn Snyder, one of the best coaches in the NBA, I think, and with some of the best developmental staff that we have in Utah, there's just a lot of upside for him to come in and take a little while, play in the G League, be a project, but I think there's a lot of potential, especially on the defensive side.
Yeah, for sure. If you're talking about a moldable piece of clay, that's the guy right there. But, so that's all we have time for in today's episode. But we'll be coming out with another episode before the draft with any pre-draft Jazz news, as well as anyone that we'd like to see the Jazz maybe trade up for. It's going to be a lot of fun, so be sure to tune in. Hope you guys liked today's episode. If you did, please spread the word to all your friends who are looking around for some good Jazz content to listen to at work, at home, at the gym, anywhere in between. We also have a Facebook page, Upper Bowl Perspective, so be sure to follow that. Once again, I'm today's host, Kyler Sparrow. You can follow me at Twitter at Kyler Sparrow. I was joined today by Jared Hunsaker.
It's good to be here.
And Caleb Walker.
Thanks, K-Bay.
All right, power to the people. See you guys later.